Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I have the great pleasure today to bring you with me to quite an unknown Parisian museum, which is the Jacquemart André Museum. The building itself is the villa of a very wealthy man who was an avid art collector back in his days in the 19th century. So today the museum consists of the permanent collection on the ground floor and maybe the first floor, and then the second floor is entirely dedicated to temporary exhibitions. They roughly do, I believe, 2 in a year or thereabout, and they really make the best out of it. These are great exhibitions that mostly reunite very well-known paintings that are quite seldom exhibited abroad. So I know that not everyone is aware of the existence of this little space, and it is a great one. I love the space here and the exhibitions they do so much that I wanted to share this with you today, and I jumped on the occasion of a very special exhibition, which is the treasures of the Borghese Gallery. Once again, it is very seldom that the paintings of the Borghese collection leave Rome, so I'm very happy to be here and to be able to see them with my own eyes. We are in for a treat, I believe, to see some treasures of the 17th century exhibited here in Paris. Maybe a few words about the exhibition in itself. So you might already know, but the Borghese family was a very wealthy and very powerful family, Roman family, in the 17th century. There was a pope of the Borghese family, and he had a cousin, I believe, who was an avid art collector. And he has collected that many artworks that he had to actually have a villa built in Rome to exhibit all of his collection. He was one of the patrons of Caravaggio, for instance, and of Bernini, so really big names. So we can assume that he had great taste back in the days, and that we will see quite a few gems here. And now let's get to it. There were several theories concerning the author of this masterpiece for quite some time, up until a document later found in the Borghese archives helped identifying the creator of this masterpiece as Giovanni Francesco Guerini. We have here Loth with his 2 daughters. The central element in the composition of this painting is a golden jug that all 3 of the characters are looking at. The jug's handle is decorated with a golden dragon, the symbol of the Borghese family. The very dramatic chiaroscuro is heavily inspired by Caravaggio, but I personally prefer the way that Guerrieri painted the 3 characters because they seem to be much more lively than the figures in Caravaggio's paintings. The motive of the abduction of Europa was one of the most established ones in European iconography of the Renaissance. We have a funny little detail with Cupid riding an eagle, which is not only one of the animals that represents Jupiter, but also one of the 2 animals on the Borghese family crest.
Its presence might hint to the fact that this painting was in fact a commissioned piece. What I personally love about this painting are the tiny floral details in the foreground. The ochre tones are that well chosen that you are completely under the illusion of a gold glimmer in the grasses. I also like how dainty and yet colorful the tiny flowers on the bottom right are. The saturation of the color against the dark shadows make them stand out despite their size. I love the play of shadow and light on the bull here as well. Its head is completely in the shadows and appears black, creating beautiful contrast to the very fair-skinned Europa, whilst his heavy muscles catch the light. It is funny how Cesare has chosen blue and gold to clothe the Europa, as those are typically the colors of the Virgin Mary. I wonder whether this is a voluntarily playful hint depicting Europa as the anti-Virgin Mary? Speaking of Virgin Mary, she definitely was very much a central figure in Florence in the 15th century. Here Botticelli's atelier, or bottega, has chosen a more original format, a tondo that quickly became very popular. This Borghese tondo is both part of a series and the most ambitious one through the number of figures depicted. I love the floral aesthetic and symbolism here. We have roses, lilies, cornflowers and jasmines. While the rose and the lily are traditional attributes of Virgin Mary, standing for her purity, the cornflower symbolizes Christ because it usually grows in cornfields and corn is symbolic of Christ. Actually, because of its blue color, it also symbolizes heaven. Finally, the jasmine star-shaped blossom is a symbol of divine hope or of heavenly felicity, and it is found with roses and lilies besides the Madonna. The floral symbolism, as well as the ethereal, nearly inhumane beauty of the figures, heavily influenced the Preraphaelite aesthetics later on. This wonderful painting had an extraordinary history. It was originally known to the 20th century art lovers as a painting of Saint Catherine, because the woman in the painting held a wheel in her hands, a typical attribute of Saint Catherine. And it's only during the conservation works in 1934, when it was transferred from a panel to a canvas, that this overpaint consisting in a coat and the wheel was removed and the original painting of Raphael became visible. It's also at that moment that was discovered the fact that the small unicorn was originally a small lapdog. For this work, Raphael took inspiration from Leonardo both for the composition, the background landscape and the posture of the model. I love the vibrant colors in these works. He briefly worked under Raphael, and I feel that you can best see it in his treatment of pigments, especially in the rich fabrics. The composition is interesting in that all heads are aligned in a way that creates great depth in a very small painting. Luteri's hand is very distinctly palpable here in the treatment of the sleeping figure, very reminiscent of Roman sculptures, as well as the very detailed landscape in the background. Personally, I find that Luteri's way of depicting a nude is very representative of the whole Renaissance period, in that it is completely asexual and is closer to representing a colored sculpture rather than flesh. It is closer to a representation of the idea of a woman than to representing a particular woman. I wanted to include this painting not only for its quality as a fantastic and very lively portrait, but also as an example of a brilliantly fitted frame. Look how the thickness of the frame is in perfect proportion to the size of the canvas, and its champagne silvery color complements and illuminates the painting in a very subtle way. The dark color of the cloth make the jewelry stand out that much more and draw the eye to the small memento mori seen under the man's right hand. Another very playful element in this painting is the landscape in the background. What seems like a perfectly normal Renaissance way of doing a background is actually the battle scene of St. George against the dragon. Of course, a special mention has to be made for this work of art, because this particular portrait is a huge micromosaic. Provenzale's virtuous craft made this particular painting extremely popular with his contemporaries. Apparently, the face alone was made of 1,700,000 stones. Contrary to his antique predecessors, Provenzale did manage to make a micromosaic that still looks quite natural and very lively. Traditionally known as the Three Graces, Owen Panofsky actually ventured a more complex interpretation of this painting, identifying the two winged children as Eros and Anti-Eros, so as the passionate irrational love, and an intellectual and elevated one. He also sees Venus as a representation of marital love here, dressed in white and wearing pearls, holding both types of love and receiving love's arms, bows and arrows. This is a lesser-known work of Titian that wasn't even mentioned by his contemporaries. Ghirlandaio manages a masterful fusion of classical elements with a more audacious aesthetics. In each of his creations, Ghirlandaio associates a robust anatomy very reminiscent of Michelangelo with the chromatic vivacity of a Vasari or a Bronzino. This synergy is precisely what gives his work an extraordinary visual force that never ceases to inspire and enchant. I love the playful details in Lucretia's hairdo, her golden threads of hair, the jewelry. Everything gives her silhouette nobility and dignity that makes her one of the female figures of courage and integrity. Her self-inflicted mortal wound is nearly an afterthought, very discreetly placed out of the viewer's primary focus of interest. With regards to his representation of Leda, it is a very tame and timid one, where Jupiter, in the form of a swan, just gently kisses Leda's cheek. This subtle representation therefore significantly differs from the more explicit representation of the myth done by his contemporaries. Despite its appearances, this is actually a masterful copy and not Leonardo's masterpiece itself. Leonardo's Leda is long lost and is considered at the moment of the painter's death in 1519 actually much more valuable than the Mona Lisa. Even if this is not an original, one cannot refrain from admiring its beauty. The poetic hug of the swan that puts his right wing on Leda's thigh, the detailed landscape in the background, and the dainty flowers in the foreground.
Alright, and this is it for today. I hope you enjoyed coming with me to the Borghese exhibition and that you liked what you saw. Overall, I thought it was a good exhibition. It was not an excellent one. I think it was a nice idea to contact the Borghese Gallery in order to get them to exhibit some of their gems here in Paris. It's a rare thing that they do agree. There were quite a few paintings that I personally loved. There were some that are really, really exquisite and that are really, well, coveted is maybe not the right word to say, but I mean, real masterpieces that people go to the Borghese Gallery for, that they did send to Jacquemart André Museum. For instance, the Titian, as well as the Botticelli and the Raphael that they got in, the two Raphaels that they did send over. The rest, I found it a bit underwhelming, but that's just me, you know. I'm not an art critic, I just share my personal preferences and my very personal views, right? So please don't be offended by anything I say. This is just very personal for me. I went to Rome in maybe 2008, I believe, and I did not have the occasion to go to the Borghese Gallery, so I was really excited to get this opportunity here in Paris. I was really happy to be given the opportunity to see the painting with the Lady and the Unicorn, for instance, or the Fornarina, which is a very famous painting by Raphael. What else? I thought that the Titian one that was exhibited was something that you do not often see in a representation or in a production or in an artist's album or something like that. So it is an understated work that I was very happy to see with my own eyes. And some really exquisite portraits that we got to see, which I personally really enjoyed. So I hope that you liked me bringing you with me to this exhibition. And on this note, I will head out into the boutique to get me some catalogue. Thanks so much for joining me today. And as always, I hope to see you very soon in the next video. Have a nice one.